College football rarely disappoints. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, on another Saturday night live stream following just about all the day's action. I'm glad that about 10 of you could join me here early on in the live stream, and we will welcome, of course, everyone else in here very soon. You have joined Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you're joining me for the first time, and I'm sure many of you will be once you find the recorded version. So we will do a live stream for however long we stay on and take calls. And then, of course, that video will post here very soon, and we will find more viewers. So this is what we do each and every day, is talk college football, not just during the season, but in the middle of May, in the middle of June, 24/7, 365. We talk college football all the time, and we invite you into the discussion. And, of course, we will run down all the big games today, all the big storylines. First and foremost is the Georgia win over Florida, which puts them in the driver's seat in the SEC Eastern Division. It's going to be very difficult for anyone to overtake Georgia based on the standings as they sit right now. Basically, Georgia would need to lose two other games, and Florida would have to win out for Florida to overtake Georgia with a one-game deficit and the head-to-head loss today, 24-17. I think Georgia was decidedly the better team based on run defense, rush offense being adequate, and big plays in the passing game in which they were able to limit Kyle Trask and company. I thought Trask played a reasonably good effort considering the lack of production and protection from the running game, and he made a number of plays on the run and still found receivers downfield to keep his team in the game. They cut it to 24-17, but could not get the stop that they needed in the final 90 seconds to get the ball back. And, of course, Jake Fromm completed the pass to Eli Wolf from 22 yards on a 3rd and 7 play. Fromm played okay, played reasonably well. He made key plays on 3rd down. That was another distinction between the two offenses. Georgia converted about 60% of its 3rd down plays into first downs, and Florida only 2 of 9 on 3rd down. So that was huge. Running down the scoreboard, we've got one top 25 game left in play. We've got San Jose State trying to pull off an upset at home. They have yet to reach halftime against Boise State, and the Spartans lead 17-14. Clemson had a scrimmage today over Wofford, 59-14. I know absolutely nothing about that game, and it's probably pretty inconsequential. We talked to Georgia, Florida. We will talk that further. USC jumped out to a lead against Oregon, 10-0, and then splat. Oregon wins 56-24. The Ducks were mighty impressive. I will probably provide some instant analysis video, as that was the game I was locked into during primetime. Utah, Washington. Huskies led at 14-3 early. Utah proved to be maybe the best team in the Pac-12, certainly in the South, 33-28, despite the loss to USC. So now Utah with a win in Seattle, coupled with USC's loss at home to Oregon. Utah now controls the South Division at 5-1. USC now at 4-2. Auburn escaped Ole Miss 20-14. The Rebels had a downfield pass that was completed in the final 30 to 35 seconds of play that would have set them up nicely at the Auburn 35 to 40 yard line, but it was called back due to a hold. It was an obvious hold on the right tackle, number 67. I caught the last couple minutes of this game as Auburn struggled against Ole Miss at home, 20-14 winners. But Ole Miss had a shot near the end of the game. There was a near pick 6 that would have proven very important to the gambling public. Near pick 6 by Auburn on the last play of the game, but the player was tackled down around the 10-yard line, and Auburn only won by 6, 20-14. Michigan stomped Maryland 38-7. The only reason the Terps scored was on a Javon Lee kickoff return touchdown. Giles Jackson from Michigan scored the game's first points on the opening kickoff when he took it the distance for a touchdown, and Michigan won 38-7. The defense was dominating as the Terps continue to fall from that incredible start against Hampton and Syracuse to oblivion. Memphis just completed a big victory in the American Conference over SMU, 54-48. I caught some of that game. Antonio Gibson was remarkable in this one, both catching and rushing the football. He had 97 rushes, 97 rushing yards on 3 carries and a touchdown. Notre Dame escaped Virginia Tech 21-20. Ian Book had to lead the Irish down the field 87 yards on 18 plays in the final 3 minutes to avoid the upset. 17-point favorites at home. Notre Dame does not look impressive, but they beat Virginia Tech 21-20. Even though Tech was missing a quarterback, Hendon Hooker, they had to play the backup. Patterson played, instead hit only 9 of 28 passes. He's an inexperienced quarterback. He's more runner than passer. He ran for close to 100 yards, but 9 for 28 on the day. But Divine Diablo returned a fumble, 98 yards to close out the first half. Notre Dame should have been up by 2 touchdowns. Instead, Diablo's return made it a 14-14 all game. Virginia Tech's defense shut out Notre Dame in the second half, put a lot of pressure in Ian Book, and they picked up a couple field goals, and Virginia Tech was very close to pulling out an upset on the road in South Bend. But again, Ian Book takes the Irish 87 yards in the final 3 minutes. Chase Claypool converted 2 fourth downs. The second was a 4th and 10 at the Virginia Tech 33. They went 26 yards on the pass play down to the 7, and then Book took it in from there on the next play with like 5 or 10 seconds left in the game. Cincinnati avoids an upset at East Carolina 46-43. They trailed much of that game. Kansas State, a new entry into the top 25, fresh off the win against Oklahoma, does not let down against cross-state rival Kansas. They win 38-10 on the road. NC State and Wake. Wake wins over NC State 44-10. Wake will face Clemson. And for as ridiculous as it sounds, Wake only having 1 loss in the ACC takes on Clemson head-to-head. If they win that game, then they will control the ACC Atlantic Division. Baylor won on Thursday night over West Virginia 17-14, and App State was upset, and their undefeated season comes to an end on Thursday night against Georgia Southern 24-21. Let's go to the calls, 860-325-3687, and let's go to the live chat as well. There again is the phone line, 860-325-3687. Just put that baby in your phone, 860-325-3687. Put it on the fridge, put it in front of the exercise bike, put it in your phone, 860-325-3687. Oh, here we got a call coming in. And then we will take to the live chat.
The call will start at the beep.
All right. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4. How are you doing?
There he is. I'm doing just fine.
Okay, yeah, I just want to get my call in because I'm going to be honest with you, I think I'm coming down with a head cold, so I just want to get it in before I wrap it up. But I have a straight-up question for you before I go on my spiel. How much of that Maryland-Michigan game did you watch?
So that was my first priority at noon. And so I started watching all of it. And then once it got to the 21-0, 28-0 range, I stopped watching.
Okay. I think me and you saw 2 different games today at noon. I think Maryland outplayed them in the first half. I know the score doesn't say that, but if you really think about it, Michigan got 14 points basically off special team plays.
That's part of the game. That's part of the game, McD. Special teams, that's 1/3 of the game.
Yeah, I want to say, well, yeah, I guess it is, but I'm just saying, if you watch that game, Maryland looked like the better team in the first half. They just got a fake punt and a kickoff return, and basically gave Michigan a short field. Outside of special teams and O-line, Maryland outplayed them in the first half. Outside of
special teams, which is 1/3 of the game. Actually, if you chart plays, special teams make up literally, it's not just 1/3 of the game in terms of offense, defense, and special teams. It is roughly close to 1/3 of the plays that are on the field. So anyway, so aside from special teams and aside from your offensive line, that basically the product of the poor offensive line play means that you couldn't move the ball. Couldn't move the ball.
We moved the ball right down the field twice against them, before the O-line
You did.
couldn't
You did.
block them once.
They weren't 80-yard drives, though. It was a 43-yard drive and a 55-yard drive. They weren't long drives, and you didn't complete the drives, and you finished with about 220 yards of total offense. That is not moving the ball.
I'm telling you what I saw in the first half. Maryland could have very easily made that game 21-14. I think we outplayed them in the first half. I really do. So
you need to go into some type of public relations for the University of Maryland, and specifically the athletic department and the football team. That would be a tremendous job for you to have.
I mean, that's kind of one of the career paths I actually want to go down towards when I get out of college.
Okay.
But I really think I'm being dead serious. I actually really think we outplayed them, at least in the first half. I mean, the second half they outplayed us, but I think at least until around 2 minutes left in the first half, I thought we were really well into that ball game. It was similar to last year. Michigan game, we were in that game for about half last year before they ran away with it. It was kind of like that this year. But the O-line, we have to do better. The O-line has to be better. That was the main reason why we lost, I think, more than anything. I mean, I'm not going to blame the fake punt on special teams. The kickoff return, I mean, we had a 97-yard kickoff return as well. So, I mean, for our only touchdown of the game. But overall, Maryland's not making a bowl game. I do think we will beat Nebraska, though, in a few weeks. Because from what I saw from Nebraska today, I mean, Nebraska's pathetic.
So we've got a pathetic matchup, is what you're telling me.
I think we could beat Nebraska.
Oh, you can beat Nebraska. You can beat them. I don't know that you will, but you can. There's a pathetic product on both sides of the field in that one.
And it's in College Park. So that's, I think, another advantage in that game. But that game's 3 weeks away. I'll tell you this right now, Mark. I do not think we beat Ohio State next week. I have no confidence in us winning that game. So I know you're a Buckeyes fan, so I just want to congratulate you on the win to next week already. And I also want to talk about a few other things I saw this Saturday before I let you go. The first thing that I saw this Saturday is that Clay Helton should get fired now. They shouldn't even waste their time with it. This guy is not going to be having a job at the end of the season. That's the first point I want to say, rather. What do you think about that?
Well, you might be right. They were pretty poor against Oregon. I did not expect them to win the game, but I did expect them to keep it close, and they came out well. The defense was shredded, even though Justin Herbert got off to a slow start. He then shredded them, and yeah, they just got steamrolled. Oregon was so much better than them. I just didn't anticipate it to that degree. I thought USC, based on how they've played at home this year, would be more competitive, and it looked that way out of the gate at 10-0, and then wow. Well, you also have to understand that USC is one of the more beat up teams in college football. And I don't know that that's Clay Helton's, it's his responsibility. It all stops with him. The buck stops at his desk, and there are no excuses, but that is a legitimate issue with USC. They're playing a fifth string running back right now. For example.
I know they're banged up offensively, but I mean,
and defensively.
No way. I don't even know the final score of the game. I turned it off when it was 35-17 because I knew what was coming. So
56-24.
Yeah, that could not be happening if you're USC at all. A few other takes I have. We overreacted on Georgia throughout the whole season. Since the South Carolina loss, we overreacted on them.
Who did?
Because they were clearly the better team today against Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Another note that I want to make is that we have to start considering the AAC as the Power Six.
Yeah, I would like to do a little study on that, which would mean taking all the Power Five American Conference results and really grinding it down to see how well they performed against the Power Five. You know, people get impressed by high scores and exciting games like what we saw tonight with Memphis and SMU. That's not really my criteria for evaluating how good the American Conference is.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand your point. There's about 4 or 5 pretty good teams in the American Conference.
I think if those two teams play 100 times, each of them are going to win 50 and lose 50.
The two teams we saw tonight.
Yeah,
in the American.
SMU and Memphis.
Sure.
And one other quick note I want to make. I don't want to call for someone else's job, but Larry Taggart at Florida State has to go as well. That was absolutely embarrassing today at 3:30.
Yeah, an incredibly poor
Miami
offensive performance.
They were letting Cam Akers. I don't know how much of the game you watched, but they were letting Cam Akers play quarterback.
Well, they've been doing that for the last at least 3 to 4 to 5 weeks with some degree of effectiveness.
I haven't watched Florida State very much this season. This was probably, I think, really the only third game with them I watched this season. So I didn't know that. But it's bad down there in Tallahassee. That's all I have to say about them. A good win for Manny Diaz. I know people are calling for his job. You're not going to hear that, I don't think, for the rest of the season. So good win for him. Back-to-back road victories in the ACC. And, yeah, that's basically all I have as of right now. I'm probably going to, after this, just go to bed, honestly, because I'm not really feeling that well. But, yeah.
All right, McD, thanks for bringing it. You get yourself some rest and fluids and do all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Get yourself healthy. All right. Good to hear from you.
Bye-bye.
So we've got the first college football playoff rankings coming out on Tuesday. We have some powerhouses in play like LSU, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, of course, next week. We had a gigantic game with Georgia, Florida today. Oregon with a huge win against USC. Utah takes over the South Division in the Pac-12. A lot of implications going on. First call, Maryland football. McD jumps in there, and it's going to be Maryland football, despite how bad they are and how they continue to get steamrolled week after week after week. And it's not just against the Michigans of the world. It was against Minnesota last week, 52-10. It was against Purdue. It was against everybody. Wow. Has there been a team that has collapsed this season like Maryland? And what they showed us the first 2 weeks, albeit against Hampton and against the Syracuse team that was ranked in the top 15 and should not have been. But I did not like the Mike Locksley hire. I am on record going way back to when the hire was made. I don't know why you hire the guy if you're Maryland. Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Mark, it's a reasonable comp.
Hey,
Man,
what's going on?
I was dying listening to that call right off the bat. Yeah, Maryland outplayed Michigan in the first half.
It was 28-0, but they outplayed them. Certainly.
I turned the game on before I went in to go start making myself some lunch, and I heard a bunch of noise. What I assumed was the kickoff, and I went to look at the TV, and Michigan, without even playing a single down, was already scored 7 points somehow. And I was like, okay, well, I think Purdue and Nebraska may be more fun. And it turns out it was.
It certainly was.
But yeah, I gotta hand it to McD Sports 4 there.
He loves his Terps.
That was some good stuff.
He has been telling us since last season that they were going to the Big Ten championship game, all off season Big Ten championship game. And for some reason, he's got some kind of vendetta against Minnesota. He hates Minnesota. They've been overrated. Could not wait for that Minnesota-Maryland matchup. And that one was last week, 52-10. So I feel bad for McD, but he's I hand it to people that are not bandwagon fans that stay with their teams regardless of how bad they are. And that's McD. He's a Terps fan.
Yep. I actually got a cousin who goes to Maryland,
Okay.
but so I know nothing else about them other than I had to ask her what a terrapin was, or why. Well, actually, I knew what a terrapin. I didn't know what terp was.
Yeah.
She said it stands for terrapin. Well, I'm like, so your mascot is a turtle? And I said that derogatorily. I'm like, why in the world would anyone choose a mascot as a turtle? And she said it's because turtles can only move forward. They can't move backwards.
Oh. They had to
So
think
if
it.
anyone wondered why they call themselves the terps or terrapins instead of something cool like a lion, well, that's why, because turtles can only move forward. But
What's an interesting take on
I think
athletic prowess? Yes.
I think their football team might have something to say about that this year because they started off good and they've done nothing but go back since then.
Well, I think moving slowly forward translates to about 200 yards of total offense today. That's what they're doing. They are eventually gaining yardage. Just takes them a long time, and it's in small increments, and it isn't very effective.
Well, and college football, at least today's day in college football would prove the story of the tortoise and the hare completely wrong. All right, the rabbit is going to win every time. Right now, you got to be able to move and move fast. You got to be able to score points, and Maryland can't do that. But anyway, so playoff rankings coming out here pretty soon. I think you and I are both in agreement that Ohio State should be number one. They've been the most dominant team, and the gap between 1 and 2 in that comparison is not really that close. Do you agree with that?
Actually, we're not in agreement because I reward the resume. So LSU's my number one team, or at least they were going into this week, and obviously none of them played, so they will retain the number one ranking. But I completely agree. I understand completely the Ohio State argument that they've been the most dominant team, most complete team, have really not played a poor game, have been complete start to finish every game.
Okay.
Totally understand.
If it were up to me, I would have Ohio State 1, LSU 2. I would just have flip-flop those, and I'm not even sure what my 3, 4, and 5 would be. But I'm just going to make a prediction, and just so I said that first, so you guys don't think I think this is right or justified. But I just have a feeling the playoff committee is going to put LSU and Alabama 1 and 2. If for no other reason than to recreate the Game of the Century title from 2011.
I saw you mention that in the chat yesterday. I would not be surprised if that happened because they have a legitimate out the next week and they can plummet the loser wherever they need to. So they could preconceive a situation in which they say, we want to, generate hype for a 1-2 matchup. So why not rank them 1 and 2 and we can justify it. And then when the loser, regardless of the score, the loser, we can drop them to 4 or wherever we need to, that we really rightfully think that they should be placed now. And we just drop them to 3 or 4. Sure.
Right. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think they'll have Ohio State right there at 3. And then I guess you'd have Clemson at 4 at this point. So just a couple more things here. I thought, and I think you posted my comment on this, but I thought Florida looked woefully unprepared for this game. I mean, to open up with you have to take 2 timeouts on your opening possession, and you still turn the ball over on downs. I mean, that kind of confusion and just unable to execute persisted for 3 quarters of that game. And by the time they actually started moving the ball consistently and started scoring a little bit, it was just too late. and I put that on Dan Mullen. There was one scene. I'm watching the SC Network right now where they did a flashback of where they're going over how the Florida and Georgia game went, and there was one point where Dan Mullen had to waste a timeout in the second half, and he's sliding up his offensive coordinator because apparently he didn't know which play they were going with, and the players were all confused. And I'm just I'm like, man, this is your fault. This all comes back to you as the head coach. The players are not ready for this game somehow after 2 weeks, and apparently the staff weren't either. I mean, you guys are having to waste timeouts through the entire game just to be able to make sure you know what play you're going to run. I mean, it was just that Florida-Georgia game was honestly supposed to be a match between a more talented Georgia versus what a lot of people were saying this year was a better coached Florida. Well, the more talented Georgia showed that they showed up, but Florida lost that game, in my opinion, because of coaching, and not necessarily coaching on the field. Although there were some really strange fourth down play calls that they made, but not necessarily coaching on the field, but coaching before the game. They just did not look ready for that game, and that's, to me, in my opinion, that's why they lost.
Yeah, I can certainly see your point. I thought that the two deciding factors in the game in regards to the play on the field, obviously you're speaking to the preparation, the play calling, the game management, was that Georgia could move the chains and provided some semblance of a running game. They didn't tear up Florida on the ground, but they were able to take pressure off the passing game by moving the ball on the ground. They gained about 120 yards on the ground. Florida was completely inept and got away from the run because they just couldn't move the ball on the ground. And so the Georgia offensive line versus the Florida defensive line, they were able to get some movement versus the other way around. Florida was inept running the football. That put too much pressure on Trask, made them one-dimensional. And the other, there were just more blown assignments on the Florida side, i.e. the Lawrence Cager 52-yard touchdown, but there were some other ones more so than Georgia. Georgia played a crisper game. They didn't blow as many plays and big plays, and Georgia took advantage of that. They made bigger plays, and they also ran the ball and defended the run.
And your favorite unit in all of college football, the O-line.
Yes.
That's what was almost kind of unbelievable today. Florida had nothing on Georgia's O-line. They could not. They didn't even breathe on Jake Fromm all game.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to be interested to watch is Auburn's front four versus that Georgia O-line. I wonder if Georgia's going to be as effective offensively against Auburn's front four. I think that game's in 2 weeks. So I just wonder what or how they'll fare against a D line that will actually be able to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, because that's how Auburn kept it close with LSU.
Sure.
They were able to drop back, 6 or 7, and only pressure them with 4.
Yep.
So that's going to be a fun watch here in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's an elite matchup. Certainly.
But yeah, you certainly are right that the O-line can really make all the difference in the game. And even with that O-line that Georgia had, that just was just suffocating, really. It's not like they scored 40 points or anything. They had to settle for a lot of field goals. So there's definitely still a lot of I think weaknesses to be able to that a good coach defense can take advantage of. But yeah, it was a combination, in my opinion, of just having no running game at all, but I think a lot of that, some of that, and then just most of the game itself was was the preparation before the game. I think a lot of what you see on the field happens happens on the practice field on the week before the game, or 2 weeks in this particular case.
Absolutely.
And I just don't think Florida's head coaching staff did a good job at all.
No question about that in terms of preparation for the game. Yeah, I think we saw one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the nation playing one of the top 15 teams in the nation. And they pretty much brought their they didn't, it wasn't like Georgia is capable, if they play 10 times, Georgia's capable of winning 2 times by 3 touchdowns. And Florida's going to win 3 or 4 times in close games. And then Georgia's going to win the other games similar to what we saw. They probably both played B games, B minus games, but Georgia's B minus game is decidedly better. I'm not going to say substantially better, decidedly better than Florida's.
And one last thing here, Mark. Okay, so some people can come on here and give you a for instance. I don't really do that much, but I'm going to go ahead and do it once right now.
Sure.
After what we just saw Oregon do to USC. So, for instance, comes down to it when it's all said and done. Alabama has beaten LSU in a classic game, maybe by 7 or 10 points. They have gone on and beaten Georgia comfortably. So they're sitting at 13-0. You've got Ohio State up there at 13-0. You've got Clemson at 13-0. Those are your 3 ends, no matter what.
Okay.
All right. LSU 11-1 with wins over Texas, Florida, Auburn. If you want to count Texas A&M as a good win, go ahead. And Oregon as a Pac-12 champion at 12-1, but with a loss to Auburn that LSU managed to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you put in?
Which one do I put in? I put in Oregon because they won a conference championship. I understand the LSU argument, and I think LSU's better than Oregon. So if I'm being charged with pick the 4 best teams, I take LSU. But I would honor the conference championship each and every time. I just would.
I do want to ask you about that because you told me that you're a resume guy. Now, because I wonder if you just take out the label of conference championship game and let's just say Oregon played just 13 games and LSU played 12.
Yeah.
Are LSU's 12 games not more impressive than Oregon's 13 games?
Well, how impressive is Texas right now? How impressive is that win? That's gone from a top 10 win to a top 30 or 40 win. So,
in this particular case, though, and I understand the argument, but I mean, I think it's fair to say the Texas we saw against LSU is worth a lot more than the Texas we're seeing now after half their team's in the injury tent.
Okay.
I think that is fair to point out.
That's fair to point out. I propose taking some middle ground on that. I think one of the classic examples of that comes to mind would be the Alabama 2017 resume with the Florida State win as the number 3 team in the country in the opener, and then Florida State finishes 7-6 and actually 6-6 at the time of the committee's decision. So how good is that win? Is Florida State a 6-6 team? Or are they the number 3 team in the country? Well, they did nothing to earn the number 3 ranking in the country. That was just a made-up, preconceived notion, evaluation that they were going to be the number 3 team in the country. They did show us that they were 6-6, but there were mitigating circumstances involving DeAndre Francois being injured, and they probably were better than that, a 6-6 team when they played Alabama, and they checked out. Right. And those things are very subjective analysis. So I think the same thing here. Was Texas probably a better team in week 2 than they are now? Certainly looks that way, but at the same time, or did they show us who they truly are later in the season? I think there's some combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't give credit to LSU for beating a top 10 team. Let's say Texas finishes 7-5. I'm not going to give LSU the credit of beating one of the top 5 to 10 teams in the nation, nor am I going to say and completely just judge them on a 7-5 Texas team at the close of the season. I would take into consideration everything that you just noted. We know that Texas has suffered a number of injuries, and we're a healthy unit in week 2. And the game was on the road. True. You could also say that Oregon's one loss was in a game in which they played better than Auburn. I wouldn't say dominated, but they played much better. They outplayed them for 50 or 55 minutes of game time, and then they blew it.
Yeah.
And they missed a ton of their wide receiver core. I don't know how many Oregon fans go after me constantly that I should be ranking Oregon ahead of Auburn because they were missing all their best wide receivers and they would have won the game. Well, I don't know that they would have won the game because they didn't win the game and we don't know. But we can take that into consideration as well.
And so you would take Oregon's Oregon's notable wins in this scenario would be Washington and Utah.
Washington, Utah, it depends what you consider notable. If you're going to count Texas A&M, maybe you count USC and Washington State.
Right.
They're probably
and then LSU, of course, you'll have Florida likely at I'm not sure if likely is the best word, but a good chance it'll be a 10-2 Florida team.
Yeah.
But there is possibility it'd be 9-3. Florida doesn't ever seem to play well against Missouri. And then you also have the common denominator here, the Auburn team that LSU struggled against, but still won. And I don't really want to say struggled against. They actually lit them up between the 20s, but they just had problems closing all of their drives. But they did win, and Auburn did beat Oregon, even on a stupid decision at the end of on their last play they did, which honestly they could have lost them the game.
Yep.
But they still managed to win. So it's just hard for me if you take out the arbitrary label of conference championship game, because that's just what we call it. In reality, it really just is another 60 minutes of football. It really, honestly, shouldn't be worth more than the other games on your schedule. I mean, was Clemson playing was it Pittsburgh last year? A big game, a big point on their resume? No, it was a terrible team they were playing. But it just happened to carry the weight of ACC conference champion. So I guess I'm just wondering why we should assign more weight to the one game at the end of the year, or that the people that all the teams who are eligible get to play. I'm wondering if we just take a look at Oregon's in my hypothetical scenario, which honestly I think is kind of likely at this point. If we just take a look at this scenario, are Oregon's 13 games, 12 wins and 1 loss, would they outrank LSU's 12 games? Right now, that most people are saying LSU has the best resume in the country, right? Right now, most people, including you, including me, are saying they have the best resume in the country. So at the end of the season, we can't backtrack on that, can we? I mean, they should still have the best resume, even with a close loss to Alabama in Tuscaloosa, right?
Sure. We're possibly looking at two different things. You are looking at each game equally, and I understand that as an evaluation of the teams to try to determine the 4 teams that are the best or the most deserving to make the playoff. I am saying that we play conferences and we have formed conferences, I would hope, for a reason. Otherwise, why have them? If we're just taking data points and everybody plays data points that need to be measured, then yeah, the conference championship means nothing. Then why play it? Why
Right.
not? Why not? Maybe at the end of the year, why not say, man, we're really having a tough time selecting LSU or Oregon. Why don't we just grab another team from the Pac-12 that we really want to see Oregon play? Oh, they didn't play so and so this year. Let's have them play them. And LSU, well, they didn't play Georgia. Why don't we have them play Georgia this week? Because that might break the tie and give us another evaluation to go off of. So let's do that.
I kind of like that. I kind of like the way that sounds. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure if you were joking, but
well, I am joking,
like
but that's one way to look at it. That yes, every game's the same. You're right. If we're just evaluating the teams based on their performance on the field, and trying to measure performance, trying to measure first and foremost results, then the performance. You know, a 50-0 win against Auburn would be much weightier than a 31-28 win against Auburn, is what I mean when I say performance. And then against the schedule, against the strength of the schedule, yes, that conference championship game is just another data point against typically a really good team. But maybe in the case of Pitt last year, or to a lesser extent Northwestern last year, it's not such a great data point. And it's just another game on the schedule in which some of these teams play 3 or 4 tougher games than they did in playing the conference championship game. But I would like to think that the conference championships mean something, or should mean something.
Your top 25 that actually makes sense are based on pretty much kind of my resume argument that I'm making right now.
It is.
So are you saying your top 4 at the end of the season that actually makes sense are still, or might not actually be the 4 you would put in, that you would still then, for the playoffs, you would use the conference championship model instead?
Well, sure. Right now, I don't know who's going to be playing in the conference championship games. There aren't conference championship games, so I don't know that. And yes, the 4 best teams in the country may not win their conferences, their respective conferences. There may be a team, and has been in the past, of course, and looks like there will be this year. One of the 4 best teams in the country may not win their conference.
Well, I mean, I guess I just kind of think it's, I mean, I understand and I understand what you're saying about if we don't care about the conference championships, which, by the way, the committee apparently claims that they do. But everyone kind of laughs at them for saying that now. But if we don't care about that, then why even have them? But on the other hand, it's kind of silly almost for some people to say, because I'm sure you've heard the saying, well, if you can't win your conference, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But to me, that saying is just kind of silly because it's like not you specifically, just you as in general, people are denying the possibility that 2, even 3 teams that are the best just happen to be in the same conference, and that it's not really fair to them because there can only be one conference champion, and it may even be so close that each of these teams would beat each other, 4 or 5 out of 10 times. But just so they're so unlucky enough to be stuck in the same conference, which are arbitrary geographical lines that we draw, that they should be left out of the playoffs just because of that. But by the way, an 8-team playoff would solve everything that we're talking about right now. But I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, I guess I mean I lean towards the resume argument, mainly because I'm just kind of starting to see now that while we assign big labels to these conference championship games, and sure, it's nice to be called the SEC champion. I'm sure it is nice for you to be called the Big Ten champion every single year, as it turns out. But if you really just stop and examine it, it really is just another 60 seconds of football. I honestly think they're just there that the SEC invented their conference championship game in 1992 because it makes a lot of money. I mean, that's really it. Right now, the deal that the CBS has with SEC, they're getting underpaid because they've actually valued the SEC championship as more valuable than the first round playoff games, interestingly enough. So I actually think that's why they're having it. It's not because they really think it's a heavy hitting type thing, or it usually is in most cases, but in some cases it isn't. Just another 60 minutes of football. So I do tend to lean more towards the resume and just obviously, the best teams argument. But like I said, 8 teams would solve all of this.
Absolutely. So the only issue I have with what you're saying, and I do believe that the SEC is the best conference, therefore, by translation, LSU plays a more difficult schedule than Oregon. But if I'm trying to take my evaluation out of it and be more objective about it, it's not like if we had to compare 2 divisions in the NFL because we needed to decide whether the Baltimore Ravens or the Houston Texans should make the playoffs. Well, we would have all sorts of connecting data points to make comparisons because there's such an overlap. We really have one connection between the SEC and the Pac-12 this year. Well, we have Cal and Ole Miss. They played a game where it went down to the last second, but that's so far removed from the upper tiers of those conferences. We have Oregon played Auburn, and they played down to the wire, and really nobody proved to be the better team. Somebody had to win the game. That was Auburn. Give them credit for winning the game. But in terms of proving who was the better team, that's really inconsequential. So we have no connection. We just have a reasonable determination we're making that the SEC is better than the Pac-12, but we really have no results to back that up.
True. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
So that's my only issue with that.
Yeah, well, and again, well, any easy way to solve that would be to take away the scheduling of non-conference games out of the schools, and we get a lot more overlap really quickly, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey man, really love talking this with you. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Get some, but I gotta let you go. I know a lot of people are probably knocking on the door to get in.
Thanks, Reasonable Gump. Appreciate
Have
it.
a good night, man.
You too. Take care. My man, Reasonable Gump. Aptly named. So when he picked out that YouTube handle, did a nice job. Some people tell us who they are in a sense by their handle. I was going to tell a little story there. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Yeah, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, my name is Anthony.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Yeah, I'm going fine, but it was a rough day for my nose. The last time I talked to you, it was a while back when we lost to who's that? Wake Forest.
Oh, yeah.
I said that we would lose to Miami, and I told you I got a feeling we're going 5-7. So I'm sticking to my guns. I realized Miami's front was going to give our offensive line problems, and I knew that was going to be a problem for us. I knew we really didn't have an answer for that, and I knew that Hornibrook, you couldn't throw the ball downfield, so they played man-to-man all night with 2 single high safeties up top, daring them to run the football, and we didn't really do much when he had 31 yards rushing, but Cam Akers ran the ball 22 times, so that's saying, that's we, and then I don't think Kendall Browse really learned how to use Terry. He don't put him in the slot. He don't move him around. Terry's always running only certain routes, go routes or a slant. He don't use them a lot and put him in the inside so he can get an easy release off a defender. So a lot of things we don't do too good. And like I said before, I don't know if they're gonna get Willie Taggart the third season. So it's gonna be an interesting next 3 games, which I think we'll lose next week to who's that? We play Boston College, who put up like 600 yards of offense against Syracuse, and then we play Alabama State, and then after that we go play Florida, who struggled today, but they didn't get any sacks up front. They didn't get really any pass rush from the two ends they got, and they didn't really sack Jake Fromm too much. So I think we're really gonna struggle
with that game in the Boston College game.
So, Anthony, how much does it matter to you to make a bowl game?
Oh, it matters a lot, but I don't see it happening.
Okay, so you're 4-5. You got BC. You've got the one FCS game, right? Alabama State or somebody like that.
Yes.
And you've got Florida. And so, yeah, this BC game is obviously huge for you to get to a bowl game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the game we got to win to make it to a bowl game. 'Cause we should be able to get Alabama State, and then the Florida game. Just go in there. That's not a game I don't see us winning that game either. But I mean, it matters because if we don't go to a bowl game, Willie Taggart would be the only coach in Florida State history. We only had 2 coaches so far that would have gone to back-to-back. That would not have gone to bowl games in back-to-back years after 36 years of going to bowl games.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic. They've got a top 15 roster, and this is what we've seen. I think they're playing a little bit better this year, but not enough. I didn't see the game today. I had it on my second screen. I was focusing on Georgia, Florida, so I got to say, every time I looked up and caught 2 or 3 plays, yeah, it just looked like Miami's defense was completely controlling the game and not letting up anything, is what I took from it.
Their defense did control. They control the line of scrimmage. They blitzed every now and again, but they got pressure with the front 4. And then like I said, Hoiberg got sacked 9 times, so that's saying a lot with our offensive line. Like I said, Cam Akers couldn't do anything, and we didn't really make too many adjustments. We didn't do anything in the second half, which is our struggling half because we're only averaging 14 points. All we came out in the second half and scored was 1 touchdown. We scored a touchdown, which got it to 17-10. Then after that, Miami started taking shots downfield, and then the game was out of reach. After that, it was 24. Then they kicked the field goal. It was 27-10. We couldn't do anything, and then they decided to put James Blackman in towards the latter end of the fourth quarter, and I realized he wasn't going to do much because we couldn't block anybody, and we were playing. They were playing man to man outside on our receivers, and the receivers couldn't beat anybody 1-on-1. And that's the problem if your receivers can't beat nobody 1-on-1. It's going to be hard for your quarterback to do anything.
Yeah, no question about that. It's got to be disappointing that this Kendall Briles offense has not taken flight. I can't think of a game that it's really been that devastating. It was decent against Louisville and NC State, but those teams are pretty bad on defense.
Yeah, but remember, this is, like I said, this ain't the Big 12 where defense is limited. And, we don't know how good Kendall Briles is against better, tougher competition. So,
yep.
and plus, we play in the state of Florida with defense. We got athletes down in the state of Florida. So you got guys that's fast. They play football all year round. So, the way the offense is running, like I said before, if it don't go fast, it can't do anything because it's predicated upon getting the first down, going fast. If you make that offense slow down and then sit there and have to pick you apart, it can't do that. That's not how spread offenses are built. They're not methodical where they got to put together a 4 or a 10 or 12 play drive. They got to put together a 4-minute offense. That's not how it is. Remember, it's always about a big shot. It ain't a 10 play drive, a 12 play drive, a 15 play drive to go down the field to get 7 out of the drive. Like I don't know if you watched that Monday night or Thursday night game with San Francisco and Arizona, where it was the last 4 minutes. Arizona cut it to 3. And then San Francisco just took the ball down the field within the last 4 minutes, killed the clock with that drive. Something like that. A spread offense can't do that. It's not predicated on doing that. It's predicated on going fast. It's not going to be able to put together a sustained drive for a long period of time.
Okay, I hear you. So what would you do with this Florida State mess if you were running the show?
Well, I will figure out a way. I will find a way to figure out how to buy out Kendall Briles. That would be my first thing I would do. Then if I'm if I'm do that. And my second thing I would do, I said before, I would look to either try to figure out, I don't know Boyd State head coach's name, but I would look to see if I can get him. Then if I can get him, then I will go and get him. Because I run a certain defense, I don't run a 4-3. I run a 3-4. My defensive coordinator, I think is a good coordinator, will be Bob Diacono. That's somebody that I will go and get.
Okay.
I think he a good defensive coordinator. Because remember, when he was playing with Notre Dame, he would take Notre Dame to the national championship game. That defense was humming. It was playing pretty good until they got to the game, and they decided to change up some stuff, and Alabama just picked them apart. But other than that, Bob Diaco is not a bad defensive coordinator. And the offensive coordinator that I would probably get, somebody that people sleep on, is he was offensive coordinator for Teddy Bridgewater when Louisville went undefeated and they beat Florida
in the Sugar Bowl
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Sugar Bowl. He's not a bad offensive coordinator. A lot of people, they probably don't know who he is. They're probably sleeping on him, but he's a great offensive coordinator. So certain things that would get back to running the pro-style offense. That would be my second thing. That would be something I would also do. Get out of this prayer stuff. That's not really Florida State's DNA. It's more of a pro-style offense. Get back, two-back offense. Two-back set with the fullback, using my tight end more. So things like that. That's what I would get Florida State back to. Get out of that whole spree. I know everybody want to go fast. You got to go 100 miles an hour. But Wisconsin's offense still works. Miami, we saw today, their offense still works. So the pro offense still works. It's just you got to have the right personnel to be able to use. You got to have a quarterback who is smart enough to be able to read the defense. And that's something that Florida State going to need, is to find a good quality quarterback. Because we ain't had one since James Winston.
Are you talking about Sean Watson?
No, I said we ain't had. I said
as an offensive coordinator.
Had a good quarterback since James Winston.
No, offensive coordinator for Louisville.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I got you. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I don't know where he is now, but all right, Anthony. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, before you go, can I say this?
Absolutely.
I know this is the last call that said something, and I guess this is my pet peeve. I hate when people say the schedule isn't good, or that schedule isn't good, or this schedule isn't good. Remember, a team can only play somebody that's on their schedule. A lot of times, what comes on the schedule is, a schedule could be 4 or 5 years in advance. So, I hate when people call and say, or people say that certain teams' schedules are weak or not good. You can only play who's on your schedule. Then after that, if the team doesn't perform good after that, that's not the team who beat them's fault. So LSU beat Texas, but Texas has to play good since then. It's not LSU's fault. Why should we punish LSU? It's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault. They can't control how good Texas is. Sure, they just went out and scheduled that game 5 or 10 years ago, it being a marquee kind of matchup. But
I don't know. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, though, we can't fault particular teams for scheduling other teams because they can't control it. They can't control how good those teams are. We can, to a certain extent, number one, fault an Alabama for scheduling a Duke as being their primary game. They know when they schedule that game that Duke will not be any kind of major contender for anything. They're going to be a 7-5 team most likely, and that's what Alabama signed when they signed them 5 years ago. That's what Alabama signed last year when they signed Louisville. Louisville, even with Lamar Jackson, was never better than an 8-4 kind of team. So they were never an elite program. So there is that, number one. Number two, yes, true, we can't fault Clemson for Texas A&M not being as good as we thought they were going to be, or LSU for Texas not being as good as we thought they might be. But we've got a system in which we're trying to select 4 teams out of 5 conferences and a bunch of independents and group of 5s and all these teams. So we've got to make some level of an evaluation. So some teams do play more difficult schedules. And so that they should be given credit for that. If they're beating better teams, or if they have a loss, it's against a much better team, we have to make that comparison, because otherwise, how do we select the 4 teams that make the playoff?
Yeah, but just watching college football, I can give you the 4 best teams: Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, and then if I'm giving you a 5th or a 6th team, it would be Penn State and then Oregon. Just watching college football with just the eyeball test.
Okay.
I'm looking at Ohio State. I'm like, okay, yeah, they play good at all 3 levels: offense, defense, and special teams.
Okay. So you're an eyeball test guy, start to finish. So honestly, Anthony, do you think that if we were sitting here exactly 1 year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you get my point, and it's week 10, week 11 of the college football season, and I say, who are the 4 best teams in the country? And you spit out, boom, 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 boom. Do you think that any of those teams lost a game after that point or showed that they weren't one of the 4 best teams in the country?
No.
No, that never happened.
No.
Okay.
Oh no, I said yeah. I can't say. Yeah, that did happen. That happened down the road somewhere. You know, they might have been great. Like what's that? Alabama lost to somebody, and then they didn't have to play in the conference championship.
Yes, they lost to Auburn.
And then yeah. I mean, it can happen. But like I said, I mean, it's a hard thing to just say. You know, it's a hard thing to really just have all these factors in the saying what's the 4 best team. I mean, you watching 2 teams play against each other. Like we've seen Auburn and Florida play. We've seen Florida dominate. We've seen LSU and Auburn play. We've seen how close that game was. Then we saw LSU and Florida play. Then we saw Florida play Georgia. So I mean, like I've seen the carousel teams play. So it's like, okay, LSU was the real deal.
Okay. So again, Anthony, at the end of this season, after the conference championship games, you have absolutely no issue with the college football playoff selection committee coming out and say, let's say they didn't even give any reasons for selecting those teams. They just said, these are the 4 best teams. We've watched all the games. These are the 4 best teams. Here you go. Bam. Here they are. And you're good with that.
Oh, no. I still think like a conference championship, that still has to play a factor into it because you won your conference. But I'm just saying, so far we just looking at the tail of the tape. So far we have a pretty good chance to see who are the 4 or the 5 or the 6 best teams so far right now. Now, I mean, we still got about 3 games left before the 4, depending on the conference champs, 4 games left to find out what's going to happen. But so far, we have a pretty good measuring stick of who are so far the 6 or 7 best teams in college football right now.
Okay.
Now, how you stack them is up to you.
Well, we're going to have to find 4 at the end.
True.
So last year, when you say you strictly go by the eyeball test, at the end of last season, we had an issue with Ohio State and Oklahoma, and maybe even Notre Dame, even though they won all the games. If you're just going by eyeball test, maybe they weren't one of the 4 best teams. So the problem with the problem with the eyeball test, Anthony, is that you have different eyeballs than I have, than the other guy has, than she has. We all have different eyeballs.
True, but we saw Ohio State wasn't as good of a team as they are now. Yeah, they played Michigan where they destroyed Michigan, and they played Northwestern in the Big 12 championship.
The Big 10 championship, sure.
Big 10 championship, and they beat them. But we also saw that they struggled in some games too. Where we said,
sure. And so did Oklahoma. Oklahoma struggled in some games, but they got selected. They only beat Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State blew a 2-point conversion. They only beat Army in double overtime. Army. So, Anthony, what I'm saying is that it would be great, and we will never know, but you can't tell me, just like I can't tell you, that Ohio State wasn't better than Notre Dame or Oklahoma last year. We have no idea. And I believe me, I can give you just as good an argument for Ohio State making the playoff as Oklahoma, certainly, and to a lesser extent Notre Dame because they went undefeated. Just like not being an Ohio State homer, just like if Ohio State would have been selected, I could have said, well, I'll give you all the reasons why Oklahoma should have been selected.
I get your point. I see. I mean, I get your point. I get your point. I mean, Oklahoma's last year, their defense was it was like this year's a little shaky, it's a little suspect.
It sure was. And so was Ohio State's for most of the season.
Yeah, but like I said, but this year, watching Ohio State, looking at them, being that, I'm from Ohio, I live in Ohio, I'm looking at them and I'm watching them each week, I'm like, okay, their defense is, their offense is they really, it's a machine this year. It looks totally different than it did last year. Like I said, looking at LSU, they look totally different than they did last year. So, like I said, the four best teams so far this year, just like, so far that I've seen, Clemson, Alabama, LSU, and then the Ohio State. Like I said, Oregon ain't too far behind. I mean, if they win out in one of the, because Alabama and LSU gonna play each other, if Oregon wins out, I think they should make it to the playoff if they win out. If they win all their games and they win their conference championship.
Okay. I'm with you. Anything else, Anthony?
No, that's it. Oh, yeah, one more thing. I should say one more thing. You said, I remember somebody said something to you about the best rivalry, and they said, I was listening to it today. Somebody said that, no, I was listening to it yesterday. Just to let anybody know that Ohio State and Michigan has been the best rivalry. It's been the highest rated rivalry game.
That's what I said. Those are two different points. Those are two different points. Best rivalry, and I did not say that Ohio State-Michigan was the best rivalry. Not that I wouldn't say that, but I didn't. That's not what I was stating. I was getting flack on the live chat from somebody in particular making all these claims that Florida State, Miami had higher TV ratings, and I knew that was wrong, and I just went to the source. I could have just stated it myself, but I actually wanted to verify it, so I went to the internet, and I verified it. Those are just facts.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I said. That's what they said. The highest rated TV rivalry for a while has been Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, for a while, for like 50 years.
And they also stated that, but like I said, Ohio State, Florida State and Miami hasn't been the same since 91, 92, and 2000. Other than that, it hasn't had the same meaning, because back then they was always playing for some type of a spot for a national championship to go to it, 1 versus 2. So it hasn't had that same meaning since then.
Okay, so what's your point?
I'm agreeing with you that Ohio State and Michigan
all right.
is I'm a Florida State fan, but I can always be honest. Like, Ohio State Michigan has been the best, to me in my book, is the best rivalry. It's known as the game.
There you go. Good stuff, Anthony. It's good to hear from you. We appreciate it.
Good to hear from you too, sir.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right. My man Anthony on the line, Florida State fan. I think that's the first time we've ever heard from Anthony. So, Anthony, if you can hear me right now, you are welcome back, as is everyone, of course, here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Do we look ahead to next week? I know there's Alabama, LSU, and there's Penn State, Minnesota. Penn State, Minnesota at noon. So I love that. They separate the two games between undefeated teams so we can watch them both and don't have to compete, ABC, ESPN, or CBS, or Fox. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Matt.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good. How about you?
I am doing just fine. What's on your mind?
Who do you think gets fired first, Clay Helton or Willie Taggart?
Okay. Well, I think the one aspect of this that's working against Clay Helton is that he took over the program late in 2005. So he's working on a fourth full season plus other games. So he's about 4.5 years into this tenure and not meeting expectations, versus Willie Taggart, a second consecutive disappointing season. I think he's setting himself up, Willie Taggart, for a 2020 in which they say, okay, your head's on the chopping block. You need to go 8-4. There's going to be more to the evaluation than that, but generally you need to show substantial improvement. Whereas Clay Helton, now that most likely with this loss, they've taken themselves out of the Pac-12 championship game. That might have been the difficult barrier for the administration to say, it's kind of difficult for us to fire a coach who just went to the Pac-12 championship game, and especially if he would have miraculously won it. But now, with Utah taking over first place tonight in the Pac-12, they're going to fail to win the division. And they're 5-4 right now, and they're staring at, I know their schedule's easier down the stretch, but they're probably staring at 7-5. And I would say the likelihood of Clay Helton getting fired this year is about 50-50. They may have the same approach to say, okay, 2020 is going to be the year that we really, but after 5-7 and maybe a 7-5, I would fire the guy. Like if they show us the last 3 games of the season to be something similar to what they've shown the first 9, meaning they're going to be okay. They may even win all 3 games because they're not playing. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but they still have, I think, Arizona State, of course, UCLA, and somebody else, maybe Cal. I'm guessing. I believe they've got Cal, Arizona State, and UCLA. So they could finish with 3 wins and go 8-4. That's going to be tough to fire him after that kind of finish to go 8-4. But I'm going to say Clay Helton because of the 4.5 years in the books versus just 2 for Willie, that he's closer to the edge and getting pushed out.
Okay, I agree with that. But so you're saying that you don't think Willie Taggart will be fired, though?
Let's say they do what we expect them to do, and that means they win the FCS game, they lose to Florida, and then the BC game's a toss-up. So that could be key in this, what happens against BC next week, because if he wins that game, they're going to let's see, they're 4-5. Yeah, they're going to a bowl game. They're going to be 6-6 and go to a bowl game. And maybe that keeps him around for another year.
I actually agree. I think that would keep him around because, I mean, it would have been 36 years since they missed a bowl game? Is that right?
Yeah, well, they did last year, of course. So it's going to be 2 consecutive
so
years
in a row.
Yeah. And
I
I was just going to say, it's tougher to miss a bowl game, obviously, now than it ever has been in the history of college football.
Yeah.
There's a zillion of them. There's 41.
Okay, obviously with, Urban Meyer being the favorite for the USC job, here's some other names that I'm just looking up, and this is what they come up with, and I'm wondering, who do you think on here, other than Urban Meyer, because obviously he'd be the best choice, who do you think would be the best choice? They have Chris Peterson, Jack Del Rio, Dino Babers, Kyle Whittingham, Matt Campbell, Matt Wells, Chris Richard, and Hugh Jackson is actually on this list.
Okay. As soon as you said the name Chris Peterson, I thought that name was not going to be challenged, but you came up with 2 other ones that caught my ear. So by far, Jack Del Rio has been out of the game for a few years and is a head coach for quite a few years. So I know he's got USC ties. Of course, he was a great linebacker there. The 3 names, Chris Peterson, I think is one of the top 5 coaches in college football. I think he's an exceptional coach. Kyle Whittingham is not far behind, and you caught my ear with Matt Campbell. But based on track record and resume, Chris Peterson is obviously shown to be up to the challenge at 2 schools and has won big at 2 schools. Chris Peterson would break the tie against the other 2, but I certainly would be happy with Whittingham or with Campbell if I was a USC supporter. But I would rank them in that order: Peterson, Whittingham, Campbell.
Okay, yeah, I don't disagree with that. Is Peterson, didn't he turn down that job a couple years ago, though? Or am I wrong on that?
That's a great call. I think he did, didn't he? And that was after Sarkisian. Yeah. I'd have to look into that.
I think Matt Campbell would be great. I think that'd be fantastic because I think he's a program builder, and at this point, that's what they need.
Yeah.
Here's the list for Florida State. If Willie Taggart got fired, I wanted to get your opinion on this. Dino Babers, Mike Gundy, Dave Clawson, Matt Campbell again, Josh Heupel, and Scott Frost. And obviously Urban Meyer, but obviously he'd be number 1, so I'm just going to take him off.
Florida State. Run them down one more time.
Scott Frost, Josh Heupel, Matt Campbell, Dave Clawson, Mike Gundy, Dino Babers.
Ooh. I love Dave Clawson. You had Matt Campbell there. Mike Gundy's a quality coach. I'm not a, see Dino Babers. I like the guy. I love what comes out of his mouth. He seems like a class individual. He's a great guy. I don't know that he's proven much. Yeah, they had the one outstanding season, but man, I thought that was smoke and mirrors, and they had a bad schedule. And now look at what Syracuse is not doing this year. So I'm a Campbell Clawson guy. Gundy, I think he's had the opportunity to do more at Oklahoma State. I was very impressed with the first half to 2/3 of his tenure in Stillwater, but he's never pushed it through to really challenge Oklahoma and now Texas at the top of the conference. He's leveled off, and I think he has the resources there to do it. I know that he's got the resources there to do it. And he's really just that program has really leveled off in the last few years. So I'm a Campbell and Clawson guy for that Florida State job, and may give the edge to Clawson just based on his ACC ties and knowing the recruiting footprint.
Gunny to me is kind of like he'll get you 8 wins consistently, and then his good season will be 10. And I don't think he really can do anything better than that, which is good. I mean, it's not bad. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, that's not what they're looking for at Florida State.
No. I was also interested. Have you ever been a proponent of keeping like the BCS, like instead of the College Football Playoff Committee, you just had the BCS that chose the top 4? Were you ever a component of that or proponent of that?
I have always stated that the BCS formula is a great formula for other sports. If baseball, Major League Baseball would have accommodated the BCS and implemented that would have been a perfect formula for determining who should play in the World Series and just skip the playoffs, because it's got all sorts of metrics that it's got the 162 games to throw in. The problem with the BCS formula is it's measuring teams that never play each other and measuring teams that don't even play teams that played another team to compare to the other team. I am not a proponent of the BCS formula. I believe that it had metrics within it that can be used to analyze teams. It certainly had data that was factual based on performance to determine and make evaluations of teams and how well they were performing. But I didn't like the straight, okay, the BCS formula's out, boom, there it is. There's the printout, and those are our teams. I never was a proponent of that. And I know that it was only 1/3 of its final incarnation, was that the formula was 1/3 of the final result, which was 2/3 human voting. I don't know if that answers your question. I think it should be used. It's another tool to use to evaluate performance, but I wouldn't be a proponent of just taking the BCS formula and choosing the top 4 teams.
Yeah, I just heard that argument. A lot of talking heads on ESPN and Fox talking about how some of them thought they should just get the BCS and pick the top 4 teams. So I was just interested, and I found a website that actually has the formula, and they always post every week of the top 10.
Yep.
And I think it's pretty cool.
But look at what the BCS gave us, though. The BCS gave us Colorado or Nebraska and Miami. Gave us a Nebraska team that lost the Big 12 championship game, giving up 62 points, and then just turned around and put them in the BCS championship game. The BCS formula gave us an Oklahoma team that lost the Big 12 championship game to Kansas State 35-7 and propelled them into a national championship game.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think I'll do it for my call. Thanks for taking it.
Sure. Appreciate it, man. Take care.
You too.
So I would love to talk to everyone some more, but it's 1 a.m. in the morning, and I'm going to close up shop, and I am texting somebody right now. So we've talked ourselves out on college football. I appreciate everybody who's on the line. If you had any comments or questions or suggestions or any recommendations or anything that you put in the live chat that you want me to get to, just copy and paste it and put it in the comments section of any of the videos. And please support me because I'm trying to churn out as much college football coverage as possible. So I appreciate whether it's likes, comments, it's money to the super chat, whatever it is. Join our college football, Voice of College Football community. Grab the link in the description section of any of the videos, not in this one because it's a live stream, but in any of the videos, grab the link in the description section next to Voice of College Football community. I just think that could be an outstanding thing that we provide and would love it. And we will talk soon, and I will have my top 25 that actually makes sense coming up tomorrow. See y'all soon.